Good afternoon. I'm Cavill Datani.
I'm Natasha Rieger-Jones.
I'm Mia Dowdy, and welcome to Warwick Congress Weekly. This week, we'll be talking about the film protests in India, Trump's US-UK trade deal, the latest on May and Brexit negotiations, and an update on Germany's government.
We'll have an overview of the Czech Republic election, a selection of financial news from the past week, the release of detained Saudi billionaire Al-Walid, and the new laws on the term Polish death camps.
We'll also have Macron's views on Venezuela, the decline of China's smartphone, and finally, the latest on Japan's major cryptocurrency hack.
But first, we're going to explain a bit about Warwick Congress, who we are, what we do, and how we do it.
Warwick Congress is one of the fastest growing student-run initiatives in the UK that aims to unite the disciplines of finance, economics, politics and law into a single platform. We host events throughout the year, culminating in our conference in February. We also aim to provide students with various networking and career opportunities. Tickets are on sale now, so don't miss out on hearing speakers such as Michael Lewis, the CEO of Eon UK, Gavin Hewitt, BBC's Europe editor, and 18 more. To stay up to date with everything we do, sign up for free on our website at www.warwickcongress.com.
Our hope is that Warwick Congress Weekly can inform our listeners, and if you have any questions, queries or opinions, then please message in and let us know. You can do so by going to www.radio.warwick.ac.uk and pressing the message tab on the top right corner. You can also tweet us at raw1251am. For our first story of the week, we head to India, where violent protests have spread across the country following a controversial film release.
Riot police were deployed across parts of India on Thursday, after the film Padmavat was initially released in cinemas. Cinemas were vandalised, vehicles burned, and a school bus was pelted with stones, causing schools to shut across parts of New Delhi. The film tells the story of a legendary Rajasthani queen. The opposition to the film comes mainly from the Rajput community of Rajasthan, who revere the fabled Queen Padmavati practically as a deity, despite historians being divided over whether she ever existed.
So why is the film seen to be so controversial?
The protesters say the film depicts the Queen in a bad light, as she is seen flirting with the Sultan while she is married to the king of the Rajputs. They also claim the film is not historically accurate. The title was changed on censors' recommendations to reflect that the story comes from a medieval poem based on her, called Padmavat. Protests also took place in the states of Rajasthan and Uttarakhand, while the city of Jaipur, the Karni Seni right-wing group, held a bike rally. In the city of Udaipur, a protester tried to immolate himself, and in the holy river of Rishikesh, activists fought with police outside a cinema. 18 people have been arrested in connection with the school bus incident on Wednesday, and the suspects will appear in court later this week. The film has been plagued by violence on sets, death threats to its cast, and the director was initially denied a release certificate. And some state governments have said they will refuse to allow it to be screened, though this has been ruled illegal by the Supreme Court. The film was released on Thursday, the day before the Republic Day holiday, when thousands of police and the military are on security detail for visiting dignitaries, and many fear there could be more violence on the streets and at cinemas that screen the movie in the future. Next, Tash is going to give us the latest news on the UK-US trade deal.
In his recent interview with Piers Morgan, President Donald Trump announced that the US will make a new transatlantic trade deal with the UK once it has officially left the European Union. Trump stated, "We are going to make a deal with the UK that will be great. As you know, you're somewhat restricted because of Brexit, but when that restriction is up, we're going to be your great trading partner." Trump was also heavily critical of EU trading policy, stating that the US cannot get our product in. It's very, very tough. And yet they send their product to us. No taxes, very little taxes. I've had a lot of problems with the European Union, and it may morph into something very big from that standpoint, from a trade standpoint. His comments come at a time when the US has imposed new America First tariffs on imported goods, such as washing machines and solar panels, with Trump claiming that he would always defend American workers, hinting that he might take similar action against the bloc, stating, "The European Union has been very, very unfair to the United States, and I think it will turn out to be very much to their detriment."
So how has the European Union responded to his comments?
Well, the European Commission has warned that it will react to any threat of a trade war by the US. A European Commission spokesman hit back at Trump's comments, stating that the European Union stands ready to react swiftly and appropriately in case our exports are affected by any restrictive trade measures from the United States.
So what else was discussed in the interview?
Well, Trump also confirmed that he'd been invited for a state visit in October, shrugging off growing criticism and plans for mass protests, and instead highlighting the fan mail that he received from British supporters. With Trump stating that he was very popular in the UK, as his anti-immigrant and anti-EU stance meant he shared the values of many British voters. His comments come at a time when many are worried that Britain's special relationship with the US has cooled, following Trump's recent clash with Theresa May on Twitter over his retweets of Britain First videos. However, in his interview, Trump stated that May was doing a great job and apologised for retweeting anti-Muslim content from the group, claiming that he knew nothing about them. He said, "If you're telling me they're horrible racist people, I certainly apologise." Trump also expressed doubt over the existence of climate change. Trump was met with global condemnation when he announced in June that the US was withdrawing from the climate agreement signed by 195 nations, with countries making voluntary pledges to cut carbon emissions in an attempt to restrict an increase in global temperatures to less than 2 degrees. However, in the interview, Trump stated that he was a believer in clean air and clean water and would be willing to re-enter the Paris Agreement if the US was given a good deal. Speaking of tensions, Brexit continues to pose huge issues for Theresa May.
An influential group of peers in the House of Lords have warned that May's flagship Brexit legislation is constitutionally unacceptable and will need to be rewritten. The warning comes as peers in the upper chamber are getting ready to begin the lengthy process of debating the EU withdrawal bill, which seeks to turn all existing EU law into UK statute in time for Britain to formally leave the bloc in March 2019, with the legislation already being passed in the House of Commons earlier this month. More than 180 members are already lined up to speak during the two-day debate accompanying the legislation's second reading today and tomorrow, arguing that while the legislation is necessary to ensure legal continuity after Brexit, it has fundamental flaws in its current state, with the Lords Constitution Committee claiming that the bill risks undermining the legal certainty it seeks to provide, as well as giving overly broad powers to government ministers. Baroness Taylor of Bolton, who chairs the committee, said, "We acknowledge the scale challenge and unprecedented nature of the task of converting existing EU law into UK law, but as it stands, this bill is constitutionally unacceptable. We are disappointed that the government has not acted on a number of our recommendations." Meanwhile, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has reiterated his opposition to a second referendum on leaving the EU, stating that the ship has sailed, on Labour's hopes to remain and reform. Instead of asking for a second referendum, Corbyn stated that Labour would demand a meaningful vote in Parliament on the terms of the deal. His comments come despite the fact that last week a poll of more than 5,000 people by ICM showed that more people favoured a second referendum than opposed one, with 58% supporting a fresh vote, giving it a 16-point lead over the 42% who were against such a move. However, leader of the Liberal Democrats and Speaker at Warwick Congress's conference in 2017, Sir Vince Cable, criticised Corbyn for his comments, claiming that the leadership of the Labour Party is moving closer and closer to the Conservatives' hard Brexit, which Cable claimed would damage the economy and cost jobs. He stated, "They are betraying their own members and parliamentary base, who want to remain part of the customs union and single market. Rather than ruling out the increasingly popular call for a vote on the terms of a deal, which would include an exit from Brexit, they should be doing their job as the official opposition and backing the public to have their final say."
Now, last week we spoke about the ongoing situation in Germany's government. So what's the latest, Tash?
Well, Germany's political future continues to hang in the balance, with the issue of refugee access being a real sticking point in the negotiations between both Christian Democrats and Social Democrats. The issue of refugees comes down to one central point. Should all refugees who left family members behind in countries such as Syria be allowed to bring them to Germany? While the Social Democrats are in favour, Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats disagree.
So why is this such a contentious issue?
Well, the Conservative base in Germany have led a long-standing problem with refugee access policy. In 2015 to 2016, following anger at Merkel's open-door asylum policy, thousands of voters defected to the populist Alternative Party. And that's not the only problem to contend with. The Christian Democrats' sister party, the Christian Social Union, have condemned the Social Democrats' call for compassion. Stefan Meyer, an MP for the Christian Social Union, said, "We promised our voters that we would control and limit immigration, and that's what we're going to do." Clearly, Conservatives want to keep the restricted form as asylum, known as subsidiary protection, where family reunions for this group are suspended until March this year.
So what is needed for the negotiations to be successful then?
Well, the outline agreement made earlier this month between the Christian Democrats and Social Democrats suggested an annual cap of 180,000 to 220,000 for refugees, and only 1,000 family members can join per month. In agreement with many human rights organisations, the Social Democrats are now looking for greater concessions to be made. They want further progress made on the amount of family members allowed per month, and want to see a push towards 2,000 members allowed, which is bound to agitate Conservatives even more. So far, there have been few signs to suggest an agreement is close to being reached, and Germany has been without a government for 4 months, and the pressure is growing on both sides to find a resolution. But unless they can resolve their differences on the refugee issue, Germany will continue to be in limbo regarding its political future. Staying in Europe, the Czech Republic has also hit headlines this week for its election news.
In the Czech Republic elections, which saw a turnout of 66%, President Miloš Zeman won a second term in office. President Zeman, known for his anti-immigration stance and objections to EU sanctions against Russia, received 52% of the vote, narrowly beating rival Jiří Drahoš, a pro-EU academic with no prior political experience. As President Zeman can continue to name the Prime Minister and sign bills passed by Parliament into law, as well as appointing central bank board members and judges.
So what does the election result tell us about the political climate in the Czech Republic?
Correspondents claim that the election result has reflected disparities between low-income voters with lower education and those living in rural areas who tend to vote for Zeman, and wealthier, well-educated residents of bigger cities who are likely to prefer Drahoš. Drahoš has said that he wanted to end the climate of populism and fear in Czech society that has marked Zeman's presidency, with the 68-year-old opposing the EU's quota system for distributing migrants. Meanwhile, President Zeman has been outspoken in his remarks on immigration, once commenting that Muslim people are impossible to integrate into Europe. As a result, Rob Cameron from the BBC has called the result a blow to liberal, pro-European voters who believe Jiří Drahoš could bring about a change in Czech politics. Now for a selection of the financial news from the past week.
Chinese markets slipped into negative territory on Monday after Fan Hengshan, the Vice Secretary General of the National Development and Reform Commission, wrote that black swan or grey rhino high-impact events were likely to take place later this year. The warning from the country's top economic planner comes as the first official Belt and Road bonds were issued on the Shanghai Exchange. Mexico and Canada have rejected a proposal by the Trump administration to remake a corporate arbitration system that's a key part of NAFTA. The Investor State Dispute Settlement, or ISDS, is widely backed by multinational businesses because it allows them to avoid lengthy court battles and potentially discriminatory behaviour abroad if treated unfairly by an action of another NAFTA government. Facebook has published its privacy principles for the first time, rolling out educational videos to help users manage their data and control who has access to their information. Facebook is preparing for the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, which enters into force on May the 25th, and will mark the biggest overhaul of personal data privacy rules since the birth of the internet. Songwriters have claimed a major victory in the fight for better pay from streaming giants as the US Copyright Royalty Board bumped up streaming revenue rates over the next 5 years to at least 15.1% from a previous 10.5%. This 43.8% pay rise is the biggest increase in Copyright Royalty Board history, according to the National Music Publishers Association, and will affect many companies, including Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, and Pandora. Despite posting its third consecutive annual loss in 2017, Deutsche Bank is hiking annual bonus payments to more than €1 billion. Total bonus payments dropped from €2.4 billion in 2015 to around €500 million in 2016 after a multi-billion-dollar legal fine for the sale of toxic debt. The move comes amid concern another year of low bonuses could prompt investment bankers to defect to more generous competitors. Now handing over to Mia, who's going to give us an update on the crackdown of corruption in Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia has freed Prince Al-Walid bin Talal and several of the kingdom's most prominent businessmen from detention last weekend, clearing out the Ritz-Carlton hotel that served as a jail for the country's elite during a controversial crackdown on corruption. Al-Walid, the billionaire chairman of Riyadh's Kingdom Holding Co., owning stakes in Citigroup and Twitter, returned home on Saturday after reaching a settlement with authorities. The official said he will remain at the helm of his company, but declined to provide the other terms of the deal. Another government official said Walid Al-Ibrahim, head of a major media firm, and retail billionaire Fawaz Al-Okar were also freed from agreeing to deals. The prince's release came just hours after Al-Walid told Reuters in an interview that he expected to go home soon and retain control of his company, calling his detention a misunderstanding and expressing support for the kingdom's rulers. With the suspects' names and evidence against them never officially announced, the detentions had raised concerns about transparency among foreign investors, vital to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's plan to diversify the economy away from oil. Through Kingdom, Al-Walid has built up a diverse portfolio, ranging from high-end hotels such as the Savoy in London and the Plaza in New York to Lyft and Apple. Al-Walid has also had a long relationship with Disney, dating to 1994, when the prince agreed to buy $300 million in newly issued Euro Disney stock. This deal helped to restructure the debt of the then flailing Euro Disney theme park. Just last year, Al-Walid agreed to exchange nearly all of Kingdom's Euro Disney shares for Walt Disney Co. shares, allowing Disney to take full control of the Paris theme park during a time when the Burbank entertainment giant sought to delist Euro Disney from the Euronext stock exchange. Al-Walid has also had a long-time ally of Rupert Murdoch, who recently sold his stake in Murdoch's 21st Century Fox, and he previously owned about 5% of Fox.
So what does Al-Walid's release signal?
Well, the departures mark the end of the first phase of Prince Mohammed's anti-corruption campaign, which was launched in November. Hundreds of suspects were arrested, including some of the country's richest men and its top economic policymaker. Officials say the government expects to reap more than $100 billion from settlements with detainees in exchange for their freedom. Others have been transferred to prison to face trial. Also released this weekend after agreeing to settlements were Khalid al-Tuwaji, head of the royal court under the late King Abdullah, and Prince Turki bin Nasser, who was involved in a massive arms sale that led to corruption probes in Britain and the US. Several of those released from detention earlier appeared to be returning to their lives as usual. Among them is the former finance minister and minister of state, Ibrahim Al-Assaf, who recently led Saudi Arabia's delegation to the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. Professor of International Affairs at Texas A&M University stated that if they can just go back to their old jobs, it would appear that the campaign was just a warning signal and merely an effort to raise money. For our next story, we're heading back to Europe, where Poland is seeking to criminalise the phrase Polish death camps.
A bill has been proposed to criminalise statements which suggest Poland is responsible for crimes committed by Nazi Germany. Under the new legislation, saying phrases such as Polish death camps can now be punishable by up to 3 years in prison or a fine, with the legislation also making it illegal to deny the murder of around 100,000 Poles by units in the Ukrainian insurgent army during World War II.
So what are the motivations behind this legislation?
Well, officials argue phrases such as these suggest that Poland is at least partly to blame for the concentration camps in which millions of people, the majority being Jewish, were killed by Nazis during Hitler's reign. With the phrase Polish death camps being an insult to many Poles, as it suggests that Poland was involved in the crimes against humanity committed by Nazi Germany.
So how popular is the proposed legislation?
Well, while the Polish foreign minister has defended it, critics argue that the law could affect debates of history and freedom of expression within Poland. The legislation has also caused rebuke in Israel. During his weekly cabinet meeting in Jerusalem on Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated, "We will not accept any attempt whatsoever to rewrite history." Meanwhile, the World Jewish Congress has said that the implementation of the draft law would be a serious mistake. For our next story, we head to France, where Emmanuel Macron has called for tougher sanctions on Venezuela.
French President Emmanuel Macron has called for greater sanctions to be placed on Venezuela, accusing it of violating human rights and democracy.
So why did Macron make the comments?
Well, many will point to Macron's comments being made in relation to the Supreme Court decision in Caracas. Restrictions were placed on the main opposition in Venezuela, with presidential elections due in April. The Supreme Court decided to ban the participation of the opposition in the presidential poll as a coalition, the Democratic Union Roundtable. Macron condemned the lack of effort made by President Nicolas Maduro's government to address the issue and called for a joint effort to help restore democracy in Venezuela. Macron said, "We'll have to see them at the European level whether we want new sanctions. I am in favour of having them." The European Union has already acted by freezing the assets of 7 Venezuelan officials alongside imposing a travel ban on them.
So Venezuela has been a melting pot for some time. Has the situation gotten worse?
The European Union has been expressing concern about human rights violations in Venezuela for some time now, and more than 120 people died during 4 months of protests against President Maduro last year. Perhaps the latest move to derail the electoral process left Macron with no other choice but to condemn Maduro and the Venezuelan government in public. By moving the vote to April, which usually takes place in December, it leaves little time for the opposition to prepare and would be a significant advantage for Maduro to gain a new 6-year term. It appears, by his latest comments, that the international community is watching the situation closely. Meanwhile, financial analysts have been watching the sales of smartphones in China.
At the end of last week, it was revealed that smartphone sales in China suffered its first ever annual decline in 2017. Research firm Canalys found that shipments fell 4% during the year, to the surprise of many after 8 years of constant growth. With such a figure also being surprising, due to China being the world's biggest smartphone market, where many smartphone brands like Huawei, Vivo and Oppo are extremely popular. However, the market is still huge despite the decline, with 459 million phones being shipped in 2017, and with Huawei experiencing a double-digit rise during the year. With Canalys stating that this was part of a worldwide trend, with smartphones now being widespread in countries like the United States and China, causing sales to slow down. However, the Chinese market has slowed faster than expected, which is worrying for the industry, as in 2016 there was growth of 11%.
So, why has this slowdown happened?
Well, since 2015, Apple and Samsung have suffered in China due to the increasing number of cheaper entry-level smartphones made in the country, with these having appealed to more rural consumers who purchase such phones in high street stores rather than online. As a result, many people have now upgraded to the entry-level smartphone and feel like they don't need another one as they are satisfied with what they have, with phone life cycles now also lasting longer in China with an average of 26.8 months. Most importantly, Chinese smartphones now have the same features as iPhones or Samsungs, with a research analyst from Canalys stating, "If you look at the new Huawei Mate 10 and the Mate 10 Pro, their specs are comparable to the iPhone 8 and iPhone 8 Plus, but the Mate 10 is at least 30% cheaper than the iPhone 8.
So what is the next step for China and these Chinese smartphone companies?
While more decline can be expected for 2018 due to an oversaturated market in China, which may lead to fierce competition, with Canalys not seeing the Chinese market growing until 2019 when 5G hits the market. As a result, Chinese companies may look abroad to expand, with a keen eye on developing markets in India and Southeast Asia. This week also saw the largest cryptocurrency hack in Japan.
CoinCheck, a Japanese cryptocurrency exchange, will refund its customers around $400 million after it was stolen by hackers at the end of last week. The exchange said it would use its own cash to reimburse the 260,000 people who lost NEM, the cryptocurrency involved in the hack. The hack was one of the largest thefts of digital funds.
So, do they know how the hack happened?
Well, on Friday, CoinCheck detected an unauthorised access into the system when they saw that the hack had taken place. They suspended all cryptocurrency trading apart from Bitcoin. The exchange said that the NEM coins that had been stored in a hot wallet, which is less safer than the usual offline cold wallet, due to technical difficulties and a lack of staff experience in dealing with NEM.
So what is the mood in Japan after the theft?
While the theft has highlighted worries about security and regulation surrounding virtual currencies, which is even more prevalent due to the booming market of virtual currencies currently. In Japan, concern is high due to the large number of young people buying virtual currencies, thanks to very low interest rates in the country, which offer very little returns. Japanese newspapers have criticised cryptocurrency exchange over the weekend, labelling them as sloppy. It was also revealed that in the wake of the hack, the Japanese Financial Services Agency sent a notice to 30 of the country's cryptocurrency exchanges, warning of more cyber attacks and urging them to increase security. It has also been suggested that the FCA might take action against CoinCheck. The theft will certainly spur on exchanges to beef up protection for their cryptocurrencies. An ominous example is back in 2014 when 850,000 bitcoins were stolen. Other Japanese exchanges will hope not for the same fate.
Here's a summary of all the stories you've heard today. The release of a controversial film in India has been met by violence, threats and legal wrangling by members of India's Rajput community, who claim the film perverted the image of the Queen. In a recent interview, Trump announced that the US will make a new trade deal with the UK once it has officially left the EU, causing rising tensions between the US and the EU. The US president also apologised for retweeting content from Britain First and stated that the US could potentially re-enter the Paris Agreement if the US can secure a good deal. In the Czech presidential elections, Miloš Zeman won a second term as president, securing 52% of the vote and narrowly beating his rival Jiří Drahoš, who has no prior political experience, but wanted to end the climate of populism and fear in Czech society.
Brexit continues to pose issues for Theresa May as her EU withdrawal bill faces opposition in the House of Lords for being constitutionally unacceptable. This comes at a time when Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has ruled out calls for a second referendum, despite public support for one. German immigration and refugee rights have held up negotiations between the Christian Democrats and Social Democrats to form a new government. There's a dispute over whether immigrants can bring family members into Germany, with the Social Democrats calling for greater numbers being allowed into the country. Saudi Arabia has freed Prince Al-Walid and other billionaires held since November in a corruption crackdown. It is thought that the campaign was just a warning signal and merely an effort to raise money. A bill has been proposed in Poland to criminalise the phrase Polish death camps. The ban on the death camp wording has caused criticism from Israel.
French President Emmanuel Macron has called for tougher sanctions to be placed on Venezuela. He accused President Nicolas Maduro's government of violating democracy and human rights in the country, which is in the middle of a major economic and social crisis. At the end of last week, it was revealed that smartphone sales in China suffered their first ever annual decline in 2017. Japanese cryptocurrency exchange CoinCheck will pay its customers around $400 million after currency NEM was stolen by hackers last week. Tickets for our conference from the 9th to the 11th of February are on sale now, so buy yours to see world-class speakers like Professor Gabriel Felbermayr from the University of Munich, Jean-François Mazaud, the head of private banking at Societe Generale, and Gavin Hewitt, BAFTA and Emmy award-winning BBC Europe's news editor, and many more. Buy your tickets now at www.warwickcongress.com/tickets.
Congress has never been easier. With exclusive interviews, articles and careers events for our members, don't miss out on the benefits that Warwick Congress membership can provide. Sign up now at www.warwickcongress.com.
You've been listening to Warwick Congress Weekly. Our podcast will be back at the same time next week.